Okay, so we are going to use our knowledge of the Pythagorean identity and we are going to look at it in other forms. So problem 6 says verify that this is true by writing both sides in terms of sine of theta and cosine of theta. They give us the problem 1 plus tangent squared of theta is equal to secant squared of theta. So here we go. First thing I want to do is rewrite both sides in terms of sine of theta and cosine of theta. And we have to remember our identities. Okay, so 1 we know is just 1. So I'll just rewrite that down here. Plus tangent of theta, tangent squared theta. Now remember, tangent squared theta was the y divided by x, or our sine of theta divided by the cosine of theta. Now remember, if we look at this one, now this is identity. That was identity. That's where that came from. But if we look at this tangent, it is squared. So that means that we're going to square. We're going to say this is sine squared of theta over the cosine squared of theta. Now this should be equal to the secant squared of theta. Can you recall the identity for secant? What was that equal to? Yes, secant is the reciprocal of cosine. So this is just 1 over cosine. And remember, since secant is squared, we're going to say this is cosine squared of theta. Now, I'm looking at this and this is a bit messy. So what I want to do is I want to simplify this, right? And I hate dealing with fractions. I know you do too. So let's get the fractions out of the denominator. So we're going to multiply this entire thing, both sides of the equation, by the denominator to get rid of them. So what we're going to do is multiply this whole thing by cosine squared theta. And when I multiply the whole thing by cosine squared theta, what I end up with is this. The 1 right here would be multiplied by cosine squared theta, so it would turn into cosine squared theta. My next fraction would be sine squared of theta over cosine squared of theta times cosine squared theta. So those would cancel, the denominators would cancel, and I would just be left with the numerator, sine squared of theta. So this is just plus sine squared theta. And this is equal to, again, if I multiply 1 over cosine squared theta times the cosine squared of theta, both of these would cancel out and it would just be equal to 1. All right, now have I verified that this is true? Well, look at this. We have now simplified it out to be the cosine squared of theta plus the sine squared of theta equals 1. Is that a true identity that we know? Absolutely. So we know that this is true because this just is another way to write the cosine squared of theta plus the sine squared of theta equals 1, which is our Pythagorean identity. Hey, here is another form of the Pythagorean identity, just written a different way.